So please watch these videos carefully. I will be asking some questions to the audience, and a lot of concepts will be easy to relate to after watching this video.
Okay. Started from the top. I'm just gonna rappel down. And, hey, look, there's my shadow. Wow, what a neat experience. Alrighty, boys. This is why you tie knots in the end of your rope, or else you might just, wrap off the end. Yeah, baby! Yeah!
Does this mean I need more speed, Brandon? Oh, holy moly. You got this. You got this. You got this. 3, 2, 1, send it! Never done this, I'm kind of nervous. Yeah, I'm gonna get caught out, guy.
That was, scary.
I'm pretty sure you will, yeah.
How far do you oh, it's on the phone. It's not on it. Maybe not. Maybe not. I thought to myself, we just witnessed a miracle.
Babe. Can you get it? That's weird. Hold on. I'm not getting any response on the controls here. Can you grab the checklist on the side, sort of? Just don't panic. The next one over. Page 2. I have to land in the field. I'm not even kidding you.
This is Force 9.
Yes.
Verify flight ring is engaged.
Got it.
Initiate ring engagement process. Follow steps 11 to 14.
Okay,
Can
got
you
it.
let your valve hold check?
Oh, we're getting some response.
You're lying.
What's go on?
There's a pass.
Go on,
I
please.
hate you.
None? Can you please tell me, can you keep reading to the stop sign?
Will the pilot in command love the passenger forever? Check.
Keep going, babe.
Will you marry the pilot in command?
Okay, so I hope you've all watched that with me. Yes. So let me ask you a quick question. What do you think is happening here? What do those videos mean? To all those people or to you? What do you think is happening here? Yeah, anyone? Yeah, I know. I mean, I didn't get proposed in an aeroplane. Neither did I propose to my wife in an aeroplane. Okay, and that's a different thing. But what did you see? What is so special about these videos? Anyone? Yes? Waiting for your response. Who wants to speak? Chetan, do you want to try? Are you there? Okay, so Dr. Devjani says innovative idea. So, Dr. Devjani, if you would like to elaborate a bit on that. What is innovative? It's an innovative activity and individuality. Okay, great, awesome. What else? What else? Madan, thank you for your response. Yeah, I already did that. So what else? Okay, so let's say you are playing badminton. Okay, many of us play badminton, I believe. Okay, some people play table tennis, some people do something, some people play cards, some people play carom board, whatever. Okay, so if you have to make this video, okay, how will you make a video with yourself in that action? How will you do that? I mean, would you be able to trust somebody close only, or would you be able to trust just anybody to make a video of you? Yeah. What do you say? How would you make a video of yourself doing, some sports activity or something? Anyone? Would you trust a friend or? Yeah, I know. I mean, teachers are supposed to be boring, right? We are supposed to be stereotyped, and stereotyping is basically, yeah, I'm a professor. I'm not supposed to be fun. I'm not supposed to have adventures, and all that, right? So still, we all have some games. We play some games, as I said, cards, carom, whatever. So what do you tell us? What did you see? Did you see a person recording all that? Anyone? Who was recording that?
Through virtual reality? Through virtual reality?
Now, Mr. Shankar, right? Shankar Murthy. So very nice. Thank you for your input. But
What?
uh, this is all of that was real, 100% real action. No virtual reality in that.
Because
So how was this
this is
happening?
the only way with which
I understand your thinking, and that is fine. Absolutely, I respect it. So
yes.
okay, so let's get back to the slide now. Okay, and we'll see how this is happening. Okay, so I call this a new business promise. What is this new business? GoPro is a company that launched its first video camera in 2006. Now, do you need a video camera that records action like that? Anyone? In 2006, there was no space in the market. There was absolutely no space in the views of experts of marketing research and all those for a video camera. Why? Because including myself, I was already a loyal customer for some of these brands that you're looking at, Panasonic and Sony especially. Okay, and I had purchased my own camcorders and this and that, and whatever. Already by the time I was in the US. Okay, so Canon, JVC, Panasonic, Sony, they were all dominating the market. The market was saturated with players. There was nothing that a new company could do practically. And on top of that, when this new company came, they had a far, far technically inferior camera. So no one thought they had any chance of success. Yet a decade later, this company GoPro has annual revenues of more than 1.6 billion. They sold 6.6 million in just that part. Okay, and they beat everyone else. So how did they do that? And what did they find which was a unique promise they could service better than anyone else? So having an inferior camera, being already late to the scene, not only late, just very, very, very late. Okay. So what was this business promise? This company was founded by a person called Nick Woodman in 2002, and GoPro launched its first camera in 2004. This was a waterproof still camera that you could attach to your surfboard. Now Nick was a surfer, wave surfer, and his desire was to capture the wave live. Okay, so all those videos that you saw, including that space thing, okay, everything, none of it was fabricated. None of it was fabricated. None of it was a movie. None of it had movie stars or actors. These were real people, and these were real things happening real time, captured by a camera GoPro. Okay, so this company came out with a range of cameras as we know now. Okay, and these are the prices. But what did they do? They offered accessories along with the camera that made adventure recording possible. So did you see a third person recording anything anywhere? No. It was all done by one or the other product of GoPro, which is a camera which can be mounted also using a mount. It has portable power packs, smart remotes, hand grips, memory cards, repair kits, and all kinds of settings and mounts for all occasions. Okay, so it became the camera to mount with the right mount. If you are in a steel factory and if you have a helmet, because in a steel factory people have a helmet usually, okay, or in a sugar mill or in such places, then you could put this camera on your helmet with a mount which no one actually has offered at that time, and therefore you could capture the action live, hot iron pouring out and splashing around. You could capture this live, and then there is more to it. So this was the first time that people were able to get in their camera what they were seeing actually. Okay, and especially who? The adventure people, as you saw. So it removed the bane of traditional photography and video recording, that the person recording the event had to be a spectator filming the action from the outside. Who were the early adopters of this concept? Of course, extreme sports enthusiasts. Nick was a surfer, so people said, okay, when you go surfing, you can use this camera. Then gradually the word spread around, and more people started trying this camera. And then the word spread around that it was awesome, that it could record live action. So then amateurs of all kind, then even organizations like US military, police forces, rock bands, and sports teams, professional sports teams, which are billion dollar things in the US, they started using this camera. So the GoPro, they transcended not only that, they also transcended a concept which says camera that only captures. Because users wanted to conveniently record, replay, and share. So remember, I talked about the core product and the innovations around it. So they said our users want to record, replay, and share. So what they did, GoPro enhanced the promise and appeal using end-to-end integration with free software packages, two of those. The first was GoPro app, which permitted remote control for camera, play, share, watch the best of videos on the GoPro channel on YouTube. And then the second one was a GoPro Studio, like a video editor, which allowed video creation and editing on desktop or laptop and sharing as well on the GoPro channel. So now suddenly everyone could become a star because of their adventure or because of their individuality and personality. Something that someone wrote in the chat window when I asked the question. Okay, so to encourage this sharing, look at what all they are going to do now. To encourage the sharing, they started offering prizes worth $500 to $5,000, $5 million a year to creators of action-oriented content that could range from extreme sports to trick shots, talented pets, unusual locations, family adventures, and more. By 2016, 21 million downloads of GoPro app had already happened. And how many videos were getting uploaded to GoPro channel every day? It rose to 50,000 each day. 50,000. In India today, we don't have that number for adventure videos. We are a country which is a far bigger population, but we don't have 50,000 videos on adventure uploading every day. And they did this with no brand identity, nothing practically, literally. Okay, I mean, starting from there. So they had shipped 18 million cameras. 18 million, by the way, is 1.8 crores. Okay, in more than 40,000 retail outlets in more than 100 countries. So this is what GoPro did. It was a product which actually happened in front of my eyes in the US. So how did they create and deliver this promise, right? So we've been talking about it. We understood some of it. So now let's continue on this. And so after establishing themselves as a leading maker of action cameras, their sales, because they started pricing a little bit higher, and that was a pricing mistake. So their sales kind of stagnated and started to disappoint. So in response, the company is trying to expand the market for action cameras to include those who want to capture family vacation or family adventures. Okay, And now they have even more family content. So can anyone tell me what is the difference between an individual oriented company and a family oriented company? What is the expectation in volume that you will get from this? Can anyone tell me what is a typical family size? I mean modern family size. What do you say? Anyone? It's about four, right? Man, woman, and two kids, right? This is typically India. Okay, I mean so far. So in the US, it's probably like man, woman, and three kids. Okay. So they said if instead of individual adventures, we can make it a family-oriented website, okay, and also bring in pets, then how much have you added? Instead of one, now you are going six times. You will get the content. So this is what they have now. And now what they have started doing next is that the best of its library content that is now the company is repackaging it as itself as a media company, which has a huge library of video content which can be used in different places for adventure, for this, for that, whatever. Okay. So it is yet to be seen what will happen to that effort. But if that happens, that is a huge transformation where what began as a complementary innovation actually results in an entirely new line of business, like it happened with iPod and iPhone, which I discussed in the previous session. Okay. Now let's also understand about GoPro's peers. So I call it peer review. Some people call it competition review, whatever. Okay. So Sony was not watching all this passively. It wasn't as if they were sitting and watching and saying, okay, GoPro kar raha hai, karne do humko kya. It wasn't like that. Okay. Sony is the king of cameras still. In India, if you ask someone and they tell you, I have a Sony phone or I have a Sony camera, you're like, okay, Apple is Apple, but Sony is Sony, right? So Sony was not sitting still on this, and Sony decided to continue to evolve to compete, and they brought out superb cameras. Superb, I mean, the resolution was far better, everything was far better. Okay. However, where they failed was that their camera mounts, which were critical for action videography, Sony was a purely electronics camera company, and they had never thought about mounts. Okay, so their engineers could not provide a response. Remember, I mentioned response ability in the very beginning, the first slide that was there. So they were not able to provide a response to match the response required by GoPro's competitive offerings. They were unable to design that kind of a mount, number one. Number two, their Sony is again not a software company, but GoPro, because they began as pioneers, they had developed a huge team and they had good integrated software, whereas Sony's software was inferior. It could not integrate well. The Sony YouTube channel was a failure. They never knew how to market a YouTube channel. Okay. And GoPro was far ahead. So when all this was happening, and eventually Sony's video editing software and social media outlets and integration was bad and everything was error prone, eventually Sony could stand nowhere in front of a very little baby called GoPro. As a result, GoPro's 2015 revenue of 1.62 billion represented a 5-year average annual growth of 91%. Imagine almost 100% growth in 5 years. Whereas Sony's digital imaging products group declined at a rate of 14%. And they had a market share of 42% compared to Sony's of 8%. Okay. So this is what a company which was very late to the party, very late to the party in a super saturated market, they found that there was a dream they could sell and serve very well more than anybody else. Okay. Now, we talked about business promise, and the first slide that I showed you was this new business promise, right? So what is this business promise? I mean, how do we define it? What does it mean? So a promise is a commitment that you make to your key customer. If you buy our product, it will do this for you. It will help you do this. It will give you this. It will deliver this, right? So those are the three dots. So this promise guides your customer in understanding how to purchase, use, and get value from your product. It tells your customer, okay, that listen, if you buy my product, this is what you can expect. This is what you will get. It also commits you internally to deliver on that pledge because your organization is now openly making this declaration to the customer, right? So it has to keep that declaration. So how do you actually create a business promise? That is the next question. Strong and appealing business promises, they have been found to share some basic characteristics. What are those characteristics? A business promise must be based on a compelling customer need. Must. There is no compromise on this. It must be based on some deep insight into the basic needs of customers, especially those who use your product, they are regular users. Okay. And your key promise must, your business promise must satisfy the needs that no one else can satisfy. Now, we talked about CarMax before. Okay. So what CarMax did, and you looked at their website, I showed you, and I asked everyone to kind of, put their responses as one or two. So, I mean, don't take that too hard. Whatever you chose is fine. The idea was not that, it was just to get you to, think carefully about it and, hopefully read a bit into your mind. Okay. But nothing beyond. So CarMax promised a hassle-free and trustworthy car buying experience. And this was very compelling for their customers. Why did they make this promise? Because buying a used car, I mean, if some of you have ever gone into the market and tried to purchase a used car, you know what happens, right? You know how hassled you get, how much troublesome that process is, how much confusing and how much technically challenging that promise is. But CarMax made that possible. Okay, so they based their business promise on a very compelling customer need. Similarly, Gatorade, we saw in the first session, right? They recognized the need of athletes for nutrition and hydration both. Okay, hydration both to perform their best. Now there is a clip which which is there. I couldn't find it again, but I believe it is there in Wikipedia also. Okay. Do you know what happened in when the first time a team drank Gatorade? When the first time the team drank Gatorade, the opposing team, which lost the game, okay, when they were asked that how come you lost this, their answer was, oh, they had Gatorade. So this is how urgent the need was, but it was not recognized at that time. And this was like, a team trying it out for the first time in a major game league. And other coaches, they said, what? Why Gatorade? It's okay. You can do it. But the losing team said that this was a core need and we didn't have it. So this is why your business promise must be based on a very compelling customer need. Your customer needs it. And this is how you will have a stable base to build on. Because customer needs do not change at the same pace as technological capabilities. Okay? Or your competitors' shortcomings. So customers' needs are relatively stable. I mean, if I ask you, do you want to drive? And then next day, I tell you, okay, do you want to fly? You'll be like, hey, listen, let me learn to drive first. Let me get some sense of balance in this and that, right? So your need is more stable, but technology has evolved and there are flying cars, right? So that's the point. So next thing is your business promise is one that specifies a direction but not specific innovations for your own organization. Okay, it helps you. It is a lens that helps you to focus your search for innovation. It says where you will go to find innovations, but it does not tell you what those innovations are. Okay, so it acts as a test or a standard against which you can assess possible innovations. You can discard those that don't fit, and its purpose is to focus effort on the area where your key product is most likely to succeed with your key customers. So this is like corporate strategy. It is a statement of where and how a firm will compete. And so a promise says where and for what purpose you will innovate. What need are you trying to meet for your innovation? Okay. It does not say what you will do. So this is how you define a business promise. Is there a question?
Sir, no video, no PPT. Sir, please.
No video, no PPT. How
So
is
far.
that? Sure. 1 second.
शुरू से भी नहीं दिख रहा है सर.
तो बताना था ना. See, I told you. I asked. Is
No,
there
no, no, no. Actually, Chetan has given the message immediately at 12:15. I thought like still discussions are going on from your side. Anyhow, sir. So now it's visible. Now it's visible.
See, I am asking people to speak and discuss. So I'm not looking at the chat actually. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So because I'm expecting that we are having a verbal discussion, but it's fine. Okay. So okay, let me just take you through all these slides once again. Okay, so that you will know where we are. So this is the new business promise. Okay, this is what GoPro did, and then this is how GoPro introduced a new line. This is about Nick Woodman, the person I mentioned. Okay. Then this is creating and delivering the promise, the GoPro way, how they had 20 million downloads of their app by 2016, how they offered prizes, and how they sold 1.8 crore cameras by 2016 medal, and how they achieved glory. Okay, and how they are making efforts to respond to a crisis which was because of their pricing mistakes. Okay, so they are trying to expand into family and pets, as I said, from 1 to 6 times the traffic, and they're trying to become a media company which has a vast library of content. Okay, so if that happens, as I said, it will be as if like Apple with iPod and iPhone, where a complementary innovation became an entirely new line of business. So this is the review with the the peer review of GoPro, where I talked about Sony and other leading video makers of video cameras who did not take this easy. GoPro's entry, they competed very heavily. They improved their picture quality. They did everything. But for example, for Sony, their line of camera mounts, which were critical for this action videography, they were inadequate and hard to find and difficult to integrate. And similarly, the Sony's software was not good, and Sony's YouTube channel hardly had any subscribers compared to GoPros and so on. Okay, so which resulted in huge 100% near 100% growth for GoPro for 5 years, while Sony was declining at the rate of 14% every year for 5 years. Okay, so this is what I talked about, and then I was talking about what is your business promise, how do you define it. So we saw this is the company, we saw what it did, we understood how it met users' needs, right? But what is it in general? What is this business promise, right? So a business promise is a commitment that you make to your key customer that if you buy my product will deliver this, my product will provide you this, my product will help you do this, or whatever that you are trying to do. Okay, so the point number 1 that is a characteristic of strong and appealing business promise is that it is based on a compelling user or customer need, which I've explained. Then it specifies a direction but not the innovation. this is where I was, and now we will go forward with point number 3, which is your business promise actually creates a competitive advantage. Because GoPro said, listen, we are the action people and we will help you capture your action live without any third person. Okay. So this automatically created a competitive advantage. Okay. Which is the company which provides action camera? Maybe Sony, maybe Panasonic, maybe GoPro. Okay. But which is the company which helps you do it by yourself? Which is the company which provides a good mount? Which is the company which provides you a camera for action and all that is required along with? The only answer is GoPro. Okay. So this is the kind of competitive advantage that your business promise can create for you, or it should and it must. The next is that it reflects and enhances your brand. So what is a brand actually? Okay, a brand is an externally directed statement of what the customer can expect to receive when buying and using a company's product. So I'm not going to go into theory of branding and all that. Okay, perhaps another session on that, whatever. But this is what a brand is, precisely speaking. So a promise is more specific than a brand, and it provides more direction both internally and externally. But it should align with your brand, and once it aligns with your brand, it reflects and enhances your brand. Okay, because people look at the brand and say, okay, this is this brand, and I know they have a very good product. I can use it for running. I can use it for athletics. I can use it for football. Okay, so but the brand and the promise must be aligned, and then the promise, business promise, reflects and enhances your brand. So like a brand, a promise can also be stable, but as the key product and its key customers change, so will the promise. Okay. Next, we will now look at another case study, which is by Procter and Gamble. Okay. And this is also a very interesting case study. Many of you might be able to relate to it. Okay, I can, because I have kids, and I know what this means. So Procter and Gamble is a very well-known consumer brand. It is very well established. It is across the continents. Okay, so there is no doubt about it. Now the products that Procter and Gamble sells, like Tide, Ivory, Pampers, all these, they enjoy the power of this, this umbrella brand called Procter and Gamble. Okay, and the product features and marketing messages for those products also have to be consistent with the overall umbrella brand. So that, remember, as we discussed just on the slide before, that your brand and your message must align. Okay, your business promise. So everything has to align with the brand, whether it's one product or another product or another product, as long as it belongs to the same umbrella. However, this P&G brand itself is not sufficient to be used as a promise. It is too general, right? And we cannot actually just say that, okay, let's design complementary services around Procter & Gamble. Why? Because it has all those products which are the actual value exchanges which people have with this company for satisfying their needs. So we have to talk in specifics. Okay, so that is why we will talk about Pampers now. So during the 90s, Pampers promise was very clear and simple. Pampers keeps your baby dry. Okay, now this message had emerged from those times when the comparison was between a disposable diaper and a cloth diaper, or something like a jugaad, okay, which your moms used to do in old days. So in those days, Pampers came out with this and said, we keep your baby drier, okay, and we are a disposable diaper. So people said, awesome, great, I want to buy it, I want to buy it. But by 97, they already had global competition in this category. There were many manufacturers, and those manufacturers were able to deliver the disposable diaper at a lower cost. Okay, so everybody was saying, I keep your baby dry and I can keep it, I can keep the baby dry at a lower cost. So this promise was no longer delivering a competitive advantage. Now, I hope you will, read up more about these terms like competitive advantage and so on your own, because these require sessions by themselves. Okay, but you have to get comfortable with this terminology because all of this is interlinked. So when Jim Stengel took over Pampers brand in 1997, this person, as the overall in charge product manager for Pampers worldwide, said, we have to go and understand the customer first. We have to immerse ourselves in the lives of new mothers to understand their concerns and perhaps re-innovate around this product. So they went into the market, they started spending time with new mothers, and then what they quickly saw was how narrow their view of the market had become. Mothers cared about whether their babies were dry and comfortable, but cared much more about the child's health, development, and growth. So Pampers team realized that diapers and complementary products such as wipes did more than just keep babies dry. They kept babies comfortable and helped them, stay healthier from the skin perspective. All this facilitated the infant's mental and physical development because the child was comfortable, so the child would grow in a nice way, with a very good state of mind and good physique without any infections. So Pampers developed a new promise for the product. They said we will partner with moms in their baby's development. Now, who is Pampers and how can they do this? Right? I mean, after all, they're just a napkin company, right? I mean, diaper company. So this promise guided its website design, promotional giveaways, product positioning, and even the choice of lotions in baby wipes, which was a complementary product. And advertising emphasized how the product helped a baby sleep through the night and how good that was for the baby's health and development. So this is the messaging they started giving out. So again, see, the messaging is now getting aligned with what the team decided. Okay. So the communication is getting in line with what was decided and what the brand wants to reflect. So the team started to reach out to hospitals. So these are the efforts they made, okay, for new mothers. They started giveaways. Giveaways, contain diapers and wipes and explain how to keep babies healthy and happy. So they started, I remember I was in the US and, there would be somebody standing in the mall and, explaining why Procter and Gamble is better. And in fact, they wouldn't even start with a question. They would be like, okay, how's your baby doing? Would you like to know how to, have your baby grow more comfortably, how to have a healthy growth for your baby? Does he sleep well? Does she sleep well? Like that, so they would ask all those questions. So the company even partnered with UNICEF to donate vaccinations to babies in developing countries, one for every pack of Pampers sold. So what was the result? The result was a complete recovery of their business. Market share rebounded and sales more than tripled. What? Tripled over the following years. So a strong promise gave the Pampers team the guidance to reposition its products, focus on marketing efforts, and create complementary products and promotions that revitalize the brand and also the messaging. So while all this sounds good, but how do you actually do this, right? So some of the things you've seen, they went to hospitals, they gave to charity and this and that. Those are some of the things they did. But what is the underlying theory behind doing all this? So that theory is called understanding the customer context. Key to a compelling promise. Now, what is context? Do we know what is context? I think most of us know what is context. Okay. So let me see if people are writing in the chat. Okay. Nobody's writing in chat room. Okay. So, what is context? Context is something which encompasses a particular phenomena or a particular behavior or a particular action. So that something is called context. So context is definitely broader than what you're trying to study actually. So it starts before what you're trying to study, it ends after what you're trying to study, and then you get a complete context. My doctorate, by the way, is in context aware computing. Okay, so I am considerably, I mean, deep in this area. Now, what is the problem with context? The problem with context is it is very difficult to know what starts before and where it ends. It is not that easy. And it is not easy to learn from customers. Now, in India, we still have one traditional view here, and I'm sure that will change after my presentation today. Okay. The view is, अरे कुछ problem है customer को पूछ लो जाके. Go and ask the customer क्या चाहिए. Okay. We'll try to deliver. So you will today see why that is not a complete approach. In fact, that can cripple you and that can even be lethal for a business in certain situations. But this approach that I'm going to talk about now in more detail, this approach is guaranteed to provide success in marketing and strategy. So what is the problem with customers? Because customers typically cannot see beyond their own experience. I have a washing machine. I know how it works in my house. How am I supposed to know what fabrics you have, what colors you use, what bleach you use, what liquid detergent or solid detergent you use, and whether you are running it for the entire cycle or half cycle with warm water, without water? How am I supposed to know? I cannot know. I can only see how much I am experiencing with your product. Then I can not usually envision other ways a product can be used. I can't tell, I'm not a farmer. I don't know how a washing machine can be used. Can somebody here tell me what is another use of a washing machine in farming? Can anyone tell me? I've given you a big hint. If you want to type it, I am watching your text. Okay, I'm watching the text window now because you guys told me that you want to type also sometimes. So tell me, anyone. I learned this from the market, by the way. Can anyone tell me what is the use of a washing machine in agriculture? Anyone? No? Okay, so let me break it to you. In Punjab, this is where they first found that. They were using washing machines to wash potatoes. Okay. Then later they found that some people were using washing machines to churn milk, to get butter out of it, to get cream out of it. Can you imagine all that? Okay. So I'm going to leave that aside, but I just drove home that point. Okay. So a customer rarely knows how new technology or other new factors can create new possibilities. I mean, how is the customer supposed to know that if you have a mount, yes, you can always, you can also use it to surf waves. We don't have waves in India. I mean, I don't have waves here where I'm living. I don't even have a sea here. I just have a river nearby. That's all. And that's not like that kind of a river, where I get the waves and the surfing and all, right? So customers, therefore, what it has been found is that customers frequently can mention incremental and me too improvements. Me too is like, okay, the same thing which comes from like 10 people, okay, and it is about something which exists in the market already, about a competitor. But most of the customers will fail in giving you anything new and daring. And one more reason why that happens is because it is not their job. Listen, I am a driver. I am driving. Okay. How am I supposed to tell WhatsApp that you put a button here and therefore it will be more comfortable? I had a shortcut. I created it. I'm getting my job done. That's all. I don't care. I don't have the time to think about new features for WhatsApp. It's not my job. Right? So I hope after today, you will realize the shortcomings of all those feedback forms, including the ones that we will have here. Okay. that there are certain issues. I mean, if you are trying to use that for innovation, especially, I'm not saying feedback is not valid. Feedback is, of course, it's valid. This is one of the best ways to collect feedback. But if you're trying to get something new and daring out of feedback, I am sure after today you will be warned that you may not expect much from such feedback. Okay, sometimes it can be good, sometimes once in a while, and especially at that time when your user or responder has time to think and provide feedback. But in normal course of life, normal users, who has the time? It's not my job, I don't care, just give me this and get gone, you know. Okay, so learning from customers requires you to go well beyond simply listening. It's not about listening, it's not about reading from a form. Broaden the scope of what you're trying to understand. Go beyond focusing solely or mostly on the computer, on the customer. Okay, so don't just focus mostly or solely on the customer. Go beyond, left, right, before and after. Seek to understand the full context in which your customer recognizes the need for your product, then finds it, then buys it, then uses it, and then finally disposes it off. Okay, so this entire cycle, and we will talk about these things later also, that's coming up. But this is what you need to understand. This is the full context. How does somebody find about your product? How do they actually find out that this company exists? How do you know that GoPro exists? That it offers an action camera? Because GoPro was just born, right? And then how will somebody buy your camera? Because most retailers will refuse to stock your camera because you're a new brand. And even if they give you some shelf space, they will most likely put it you on the back shelf. Okay, not necessarily they will be excited unless your marketing and messaging is very good. They may not even be excited about your product. So then you have to fine tune your messaging and marketing, right? So each of these, I mean, I we can spend days and hours and months just talking about these few things. What is customer context? And how do you actually fine tune all of those settings, all of those buttons in the customer context, so that finally the customer, it's like hitting a password on a number pad, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. The customer doesn't know what the password is, but magically the customer punches the right keys and opens your product, the gateway to your product. So how do you do that in the context? So the value, remember, of any product or service is not some sort of intrinsic worth, but what it does in a specific setting. So there is an architect, I found this quote to be very pertinent. Eros Sarinen. Okay, he says, always design a thing. So this is directly related to your design thinking. Okay, always design a thing by considering it in its larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment in a city plan. If you can conceive this entire big picture, then you can design a chair. Okay, so this is how this architect sees it, and I totally agree with that. This is why we have disjointed pieces, and this is why we have friction in so many places in our lives, because all those pieces don't work together. They were never designed to work together, right? Does any one of you have more than 6 members in your household? I mean, do you have anyone? So can you tell me one big design defect in a product about which we talked today, which you must have in your home? Most of you will have it in your home, okay, or many, I would say. What is the design defect in that particular transportation thing? Okay, I'll give you a clue. It's a car. What is the problem with the car? What's the design defect in that car? Basic design defect. Look at this definition of design, right? So then I think you start seeing, you can start seeing how many defects are there in that car. Tons of defects, tons. It is not environment friendly. It doesn't know how to park itself. It can't sense if somebody is there in front of the car, right? I mean, we were all educated like this. We were told, listen, car is just a piece of metal. It doesn't have any senses. But today you have cars which have senses. So who's right? Who's wrong? It is technological innovation. But imagine if the car had always been invented with sensors and safety so that it never hit anyone, so that any two cars colliding never hit each other. Can you imagine the number of people who would have lived on this planet today who were unfortunately lost because of their no mistakes? And I'm sure there are people in your family. You can relate to somebody, or you know somebody who was lost to an accident despite making no mistake. And I'm sure you appreciate that. That person would be living. So this is the power of design thinking. This is the power of this definition. That's why I brought it here. So how you value a chair can only be determined after knowing what it will be used for. Okay. So I think I've driven this point in number of ways. You cannot understand your customer's need for your product without understanding that customer's world, how and where your product fits into it. So what are some best practices for learning customer context? So intimately understanding the human context in which a product is used can help reveal not only compelling promise for that product, but also the complementary innovations. Absolutely no doubts about it. If I understand that the city of Bangalore has made it mandatory that no car can kill a person, otherwise the car will be held guilty, okay, and will be blown up or destroyed or whatever, and that company will have to bear out a $10 billion fine. Then do you think any car manufacturer will come out with that unsafe car? They will put all those complementary innovations that are required, all those sensors that are required, and they say, my car is certified, it will never kill a human. You can put a baby in front of it, you can have a toddler crawl in front of it, nothing. My car will never hurt anything. Okay, so this is very important. Now, there are specific things you can do. So adopt a dating, not a fighting mindset. Okay, so this is counter to popular wisdom. Why is it counter to popular wisdom? Because most marketing material that we normally study, even I study, right, it focuses on competition and how to beat competition. But in that process of focusing on competition and trying to beat it every second, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every quarter, and then looking at the results, whether you've beaten it or not, what have you not looked at? You have not looked at whether your product or the products in the market are actually servicing the customer's need, the true need of the customer. So that theory creates a problem because it seeks to out innovate the enemy, and it leads you to focus on competition rather than what the customer needs. But in what is known as dating, okay, and now it's a common word in English which is frequently thrown across in India, so I'm using it here also. So in dating, you focus on strengthening the relationship. You work on the relationship. Once you decided that this relationship is going forward, it's not, I mean, there are some versions of dating, where people say, oh, it's just a trial and, whatever. No, it's not. It's not that. This wasn't invented in India. So, sometimes I talk about things which, have gone wrong in India. So dating is not exactly, like just trying with this person and then, it's like, okay, the first few things checked here, first few things checked here, they are good enough. Now let's talk. And now let's try to see whether we can strengthen this relationship, giving up some differences. So that's what the true meaning of dating is. Okay. So with that approach, if somebody goes into marketing with their product, with their customer, then you can have a million knock-on effects on how design decisions are made. Because now your focus is the customer. Now your focus is servicing the need of the customer, not on killing competition every single second. You're not so obsessed that you forget about everything else. Okay. So next thing is to understand tigers, go to the jungle, not the zoo. What does this mean? See, in a zoo, it is all contrived behavior. Okay, zoo is not the real setting for a tiger. The real setting for a tiger is the jungle. So go to the jungle, which means go to where, even if it is dirty, or sometimes little difficult to access in some gully, or you have to get down from the car and you have to walk for half a mile. Well, you have to do it. That's the jungle. That's where the tiger is, the real tiger is. Okay. So go and observe the customer as they actually use your product. When I was a marketing trainee very early on, and I had a boss who was from Ahmedabad. I still remember. I really love my boss for that. Why? On day one, he actually told us this. He said, "Listen, you'll have to get off." We were all entitled to a bike in those days, And he said, "You will have to get off. You will have to walk because that place doesn't even have a road." So we were like, "Oh my God, how much do we have to walk?" He said, "Listen, you have to be healthy. Do you exercise?" And then some of the people who didn't, they said, "Oh, we don't have a routine. We just wake up around 9 and we just, rush to the office and we don't even have a breakfast and this and that." And this guy said, "Listen, if you want to be in marketing for life, you have to be strong, fit, you have to be travel, and you have to go where your customer takes you." So this is you have to go to the jungle, and you have to have thoughtful observation. You just don't go and stand there and you're like, okay, the sun is doing this and the moon is doing this, and oh, what's the time? And nowadays you have WhatsApp to distract, and you have 10,000 phone calls, necessary and unnecessary, right? No, all that goes aside. It has to be very thoughtful observation. Then next thing is you can learn from your most extreme customers. Now, what is an extreme customer? An extreme customer is one who is a heavy user of your product normally, or a very light user of your product. It's like, I don't care. I get it, I use it. I don't get it, I don't use it. So there are two extreme customers, both sides, very heavy user, very light user. Okay. So you can compare what draws people to become a heavy user of your product. What is it in your product that they like so much because of which they use your product? Okay. Because remember, these heavy customers are the actual loyal customers for you. And then look at the ways in which your product might appeal to others. What are the other ways? How can you make it more attractive? What are the wrappers? What are the compelling innovations you can weave around your product? So look for ways of growing regular customers into heavy users. And then understand why somebody is not even using your product. So some people will tell you, "Oh, no, no point in talking to that person. He's clearly no. He doesn't like this. We know, yeah, he hates this. Listen, that's not the thing to do. If you are a true marketer, you have to go and talk to those people as well who hate you, who write against you, okay, who post messages against you. Go and talk to them, figure out why, and then perhaps it will help you break some of those out of that hatred, out of that non-usage of your product. But first you must go and talk to them and understand, and you have to withstand that treatment, that high temperature treatment sometimes. Okay, when in the field, practice Vujade. So what is Vujade? Deja vu, many of us know, is a feeling that you've been there before. It's like, okay, I woke up and I'm here and I'm in Shimla, and I'm like, okay, it seems like I've been here before. Okay, so typically that is the deja vu feeling. But a deja vu feeling can happen when you've already visited one place once. Okay, then you can definitely have a deja vu next time. You'll be like, okay, I've been here 5 years back, and I know there's a tea shop. That's all right. But if you're a true marketer, okay, if you're a true designer, what you have to do is you always have to have a Bhuja Day. A Bhuja Day is exact opposite of deja vu. It means that any number of times you expose me to something and ask me for my inputs, I will watch the entire scene very carefully. I will see it with absolutely no bias, no prior history. I will see it with fresh eyes. And I will try to find out what are the annoyances, what are the frustrations that my customers have every time I go, because this time the annoyance may be different, the next time the frustration may be different. So each of those actually represents an opportunity for improvement and developing a encompassing product. Okay, so these are the three activity chains. Okay, this is step one, which is required for mapping the customer context. So follow the customer is one, follow the money is another, and follow the product is the third one. So these three are very important activity chains to undertake for designing a product, for marketing a product, for making a product successful. Okay. So follow the customer. I've already explained a lot about that. What customers cannot do, customers can do. Okay. But what you need to definitely do is note down everything that the customer tells or that the customer does. The customer may not be able to tell you what innovation they need, or what is required in your product. But you know what they can tell you? They can tell you what they are trying to do with your product. They can tell you what is the desired outcome when they use your product, and the result that they expect. So if you can understand that and identify that, if you can understand what is it that the customer is actually trying to do, and if you can map that back, okay, into your chain of activities leading to the completion of customer's job, okay, then that's a place where you can find some gaps to innovate. So this is called the jobs to be done approach, and it has come from Theodore Levitt, which is like almost 30 years, yeah, almost 30 years back when I did my diploma in marketing. Okay, and this is it comes from that time. The famous article is called Marketing Myopia, and in that article, which actually appeared at that time, when I studied this, it was almost 20 years that this article had been out in Harvard Business Review. So this in this, Levitt says that people don't buy a product, they buy a means to accomplish some task. We don't buy a drill, we buy something to create a hole. Okay, so this is follow the customer, and I've explained uh, how this impacts business. We've done this before, so this is a slightly more complimentary slide in a little more words, uh, with a few more things. Okay, so by knowing the outcome that your customers are trying to achieve, just imagine you can discern the needs that they cannot express directly, and if they're using some jugaad, then hey, listen, this guy is using this nut board, or this hanger for my camera. Why don't I provide something, a mount? Okay, can I design a mount so that this person doesn't have to have a camera like this for security, right? So this is why it is very important. So we have already covered GoPro and how it got successful. So if we place GoPro success, in this context, so it goes like this: prepare, execute, modify, and monitor, and conclude. Okay, so uh, these are things we have already talked about, but this is the slide schematic, which helps you visualize the entire process in a more compact way. Now there is another thing called follow the money. Okay, now in follow the money, you're actually mapping all the transactions that happen related to your product. Does the customer pay someone directly, or does the customer pay a third party? How much does the third party charge? Is there a cut in it? And does the customer pay in cash? Does the customer pay through card? All these questions are very important. The entire consumption chain of following the money is very important. I'm sure you've seen this on Amazon. When on Amazon you order something, it shows you many related products, and it says customers who bought this product also bought these other products. So if you buy the vacuum cleaner, you will be urged to buy disposable printers and bags and all that. Okay. So this is how you create a encompassing bigger context for your product, and you can offer more value to the customer. So this is a summary of what CarMax did in following the money. Okay, so they had awareness and selection, purchase, financing and insurance, and usage and repair. So these were the key steps. You can get into details online also about this case study. But briefly speaking, they knew how to select, as I said before, also how to select good cars, almost new used cars. Okay, how to get them at a competitive price, and how to purchase those, and how to finance those, and how to use those. Okay, so this is CarMax success in following the money. What was in purchase? No hassle, fixed price sales, fixed price trade in offer. Okay, fixed price. If you have this model, if your car condition is like this, less than five scratches. I remember, being there and participating in something like that, and they were like, okay, if see this car has less than five scratches, we guarantee it. And I was like, really? Do you know every corner of the car? Do you know under the belly? And they were like, yes, sir. And they brought out a checklist, which is a long checklist. So they showed me, because these were initial days of CarMax, and I was there, and they were trying to build confidence. So they even showed me the car mechanics report while purchasing that car. Okay, and then they offered 5-day full money back guarantee, which means you buy the car, you drive it. If you don't like it, come back, get your money back. Now I think they offer 30 days. Okay, so they have increased it further. They are so confident of their purchase processes and the quality that they made it 30 days. Imagine, I mean, people can't go and exchange, your phone. I mean, once you put in your SIM, they're like, sorry, sir, we can't exchange this. And here you are offering a full money back guarantee for 30 days. Imagine the kind of confidence you need to have in your processes. Otherwise, the company will go bankrupt, right? So in financing and insurance, they ensured there were multiple offers and separate transactions for financing and insurance. Why? Because because you guys may not know, some of you may have been in the US, I don't know. Okay, but I will make it clear. Normally, what they were doing was, when they would sell a car, they would also sell insurance on top of that, and you would never come to know whether you were duped while buying insurance. Why? Because it was bundled. Okay, so what CarMax did was said, okay, insurance is a separate thing, financing is a separate thing. You finance, we'll offer you finance through these five partners or whatever. You select what you like, and then for insurance we have separate offers. You select what you like. So it was totally transparent to the customer, very trust building. The next thing was usage and repair. Okay, so they sell newer models so that most are still under manufacturer warranty, and extended warranty is still available. See, now you will understand the smartness in setting up a market for just newly used cars. Why? Because most of these are anyways under manufacturer warranty. Okay, so if something major goes wrong, CarMax can always send it back to the manufacturer, and extended warranty is available, right? Which I will offer to the customer. I'll say, hey, listen, if you like the car, you should take the extended warranty. Why? Because manufacturer is offering it. And if something goes wrong after 3 years, this car is still covered for 5 years. So why don't you take it? See, it was a very smart business model. Now I think some of you will realize how smart they were. It was very low risk for them. Okay, they ensured they minimized the risk in dealing with cars, and that is why they grew almost 20 times as big as the other company. That is the difference, that uh, your business promise can make, and all these are part of business promise. So the next thing, so we had two so far. Okay, we had follow the customer. Just please give me 1 second. Okay, so we had follow the customer, then we had follow the money, okay, and then lastly we have follow the product. So follow the product is more like value chain analysis. Okay, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because I mean, this requires elaborate sessions on value chain, and we have only limited time, and we have so much to cover. Okay, but what essentially it is from designing to producing to marketing to distributing to selling to delivering to supporting, and even to help in disposing of your product. That is what is called value chain mapping. Okay, so in value chain mapping you have to cover this entire gamut of activities. Then only will you know what is happening with your product. Okay, and there can be so many opportunities in this value chain analysis. I mean, people have done amazing amount of work. you know I would say millions of pages have gone into this, and there are tons of case studies in value chain. Okay, but I wanted to mention it here so that all of you who are interested, you can look into this subject further. Okay, so now we know that you have to map those three contexts. Okay, but how do you actually map those contexts right in the right way? Okay, so to document the customer activity chain, listen and observe very closely. As I said before, no distractions, nothing. It requires ultimate discipline. I mentioned this word before also. It requires courage and discipline. Courage to go there and be in that setting, discipline to live exactly like the customer is living in that moment. So you have to break down the user's activities into separate steps, describe each step, and then ask users what job they are trying to accomplish with each activity. Then question the user to gather two additional pieces of information about each of the steps in the chain. So you can imagine how many steps you can come across, how voluminous, how big, how large this exercise can be. But nevertheless, it's very important. So the first, for each activity, you ask the customer to rank the importance of that each step for getting that job done. Is it really important? Yes, no, high, low, whatever scale you want to devise, which can be meaningful. Okay. And then second is how satisfied is the user with the way that step is getting done now with your product. I mean, I'm using this computer, right? So I can call this company and say, okay, I am not satisfied with this because of this, and whenever I try to do this, this happens. But otherwise, this happens. And then when I do this, it's fine, it's great. Okay. So I need to know when I'm trying to accomplish, let's say, a remote class with this particular computer, am I satisfied with every single step? For example, turning on the computer and throwing my voice into the microphone and my picture into the webcam, and then is there a delay? Is there a cycle time? That the processor is taking for throwing up my slides. What is actually happening, right? So once you do this, you have some very precious information, and then you can look at uh, all the three contexts together. Now there's a question: are these three contexts really necessary? I mean, can't I just do follow the customer or follow the money or follow the value chain? Is it really necessary? But the reason it is necessary is because one may reveal only part of the picture, other may reveal other part of the picture, and the third may reveal another part of the picture. Or one may reveal most of the picture, and the other two may add a little bit information or very little information, but we just don't know because every situation is unique, every customer is unique, every usage is unique. No two people make dal same way. There are some differences. If you count, I mean, even in seconds, how much time somebody puts rajma dal or whatever on the stove to cook. So there are so many differences in usage. So to understand all that, it is advisable that one must take up all the three contexts, then eliminate and map out the commonalities and look at the differences which can enrich the overall context. Okay, so when CarMax, for example, when they did this research, they would not have learned much from following the customer. So what they did was they looked at the finance part, which is to follow the money, and that is what led them to the real opportunity. This is their own, confession. Okay, so they found out more about the user when they were following the money than when they were following the user alone, and that helped them make a successful business. Now, so that was step one. So all this, all the three contexts and everything, this was step one. So what is step two? Step two is now that you have the context mapped, now you will look for opportunities. Okay. So once you've completed your analysis of all the activity chains around your key product, the next step is to identify the opportunities. And every step where the customer says that I'm not so happy with this, so yeah, it gets the job done, but I'm not so happy. Each of those steps is actually a chance to make your product more useful and appealing. Okay. So what you need to know next is identify the actual and potential touch points. Actual touch points are those where something that the company does or your product does interacts with the customer. Okay. And potential touch points are those where if you were to interact with the customer, you might be able to add value. Okay. So you can identify both of these and look at the points on the customer activity chain where you are not connecting with the customer yet, but perhaps a competitor is, or perhaps somebody else in some industry is, and you have learned a lesson from there and you want to bring it into your practice as well. Okay. So are there any opportunities to connect in some new way that improves the customer experience? Look at places where your competition connects with the customer. Evaluate whether you should create a connection and whether it will add value to who? To the customer, and whether it will contribute to you as well. Okay. So there can be a conflict. It adds value to the customer, but it doesn't really result in a revenue increase for us. Should you do that? Well, if you don't do that today, somebody else will do it tomorrow. Because remember, this is a very competitive market. We are doing this course, and this course has been done in 10,000 gazillion places by now. And this has been done with professional marketing teams of different companies. So they will sooner or later find out. So the choice is yours. You want to be left behind? You can choose to do that, or you can find out how to get value and deliver value to the customer. Can you improve on the competitor's performance? Okay. So with all that, you will know the gaps. So now what we are looking for is importance and satisfaction ratings. What is very important and where satisfaction is lowest. Okay. And we will do this exercise for both extreme users. Who are both extreme users? Heavy and light. So this will reveal the differences and behaviors can be learned from this. So when we look at in particular activities ranked high in importance but low in satisfaction, these are the points where you can hit the hardest and hope for a big gain in the market, especially if that is a huge market segment. Okay. So because you asked where you are least satisfied and because you know that activity was very important, you know precisely this is the gap to address. So all these opportunities now have to be put into step three. What is step three? Step three is narrowing down to the promise. So once the promise has been generated, okay, once a list of possibilities has been generated for the promise, okay, there is no quick and easy way to make a shorter selection, but there are certain tests you can apply. So for example, is the promise specific enough to help you decide between different innovation ideas, or is it like still overlapping and confusing? Okay. Then can you tie the promise back to the insights you gained in the field? A strong promise, remember, addresses the customer need or desire in a simple and compelling way. It must come from a customer need. Does it differentiate the company? That's very important, because after all you do, if you're not differentiated from competition, how will you make a stride ahead? Will this be stable over time? Do you want a promise that is unlikely to change soon, or do you want something which keeps changing? Right? So you want something which is stable, which you can design and deliver tomorrow, and it wouldn't have changed by that time. And there are so many other questions that one needs to ask, like, does it build on your company's unique strengths? Does the promise excite your team? Does the promise galvanize or enervate? Enervate is like making someone lose energy. Does it excite the passion? Is it noble and important? You know, and will the leadership be able to rally everyone behind that in the company? Does it present an aggressive transformation laden opportunity and challenge? Is it central to delivering on your promise, or are you deviating from your key promise? So all these questions have to be asked. Okay. And the customer must also be able to grasp it intuitively. I mean, don't make something so complex that the customer says, hey, listen, I've clicked in 10 places and then I'm able to take a photo. What is the point? What have you done to this? It was good without it. Just remove this software, right? So all that is very important. So what are the key takeaways from this session? That your promise communicates the compelling customer need that your key product and its complements will fulfill. A good promise should be specific, differentiating, stable, and exciting for your team. So we looked at three types of analysis: follow the customer, follow the money, and follow the product, which means value chain analysis. Okay, and all these three types of analysis will illuminate the customer activity chain, consumption chain, and value chain, respectively. Analysis of these three chains will help uncover unmet customer needs and discover new opportunities, allowing you to generate and test different alternatives for the promise. And I've also talked about how to test the hypothesis for those promises. I mean, not the hypothesis in statistical testing, but how to find out and qualify the long list of promises for the short list that is to be taken up. So this is where we are, and we have done again. I think we have done well on time. We were scheduled to finish by 1:15, and we have. It is 1:16 now. If there are any questions, we can discuss now, or if there are too many hungry minds, then we will respect the hunger and we'll come back and do session 3, in which we can continue and have a discussion, and also we can have that session. So Mr. Chetan, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I am not Chetan. I am Srinivas Murthy. So.
Oh, actually, your name is coming here as Chetan KR.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So forgive me for that, because it's this computer, it shows everything in a weird way. It is showing Chetan KR.
Actually, it is college admin ID.
So see, there is a gap here which we need to fulfill with something, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. In fact, I'm sick and tired of having names, first name and last name, and all these confusions. Even in international audiences, this happens, and even they are sick of this. But I don't know what Google is doing about it. Okay. Anyways.
Sir. Is there any questions from audience side? Ms. Shweta Singh has raised the hand. Ms. Shweta Singh, if you have any question, you can ask, or you can type in the chat box. Okay.
Yeah, please.
If there is no questions from the audience side, I believe it is a time to wind up. We were very thankful for Dr. Nitin Verma for this wonderful session. So we can break now for the lunch, and we will have one more session with our resource person, Dr. Nitin Verma. We may assemble back by 2:30 p.m. So I repeat, we will assemble back by 2:30 p.m. So I request Dr. Nitin Verma once again to join us in the next session at 2:30 p.m. today. So we will break for the. Thank you, Nitin Verma sir, and thank you all participants.